The Emerald Shroud, once a symbol of their luxury, now felt like a veil woven with deceit, hiding a dark secret within its opulent folds. The investigation had only just begun, but the immediate hook, the shocking revelation of a wife's potential guilt, had already snared them. The affluent world of the Murray family was about to be laid bare, its gleaming facade chipped away to reveal the rot beneath. Chapter 2. The Unraveling Thread. The news of Desiree Murray's arrest detonated like a bombshell across Kingston. The headlines shrieked, tabloids gorged, and social media buzzed with a mixture of shock, speculation, and barely disguised glee. The image of the elegant, powerful CEO, now clad in the drab uniform of a detainee, was a stark contrast to the glossy magazine covers that once featured her. Desiree was held at the Constant Spring police station, a far cry from the serene opulence of her villa. The air was thick with the scent of stale disinfectant and unspoken judgment. She maintained her composure, a steely resolve etched onto her features, even as the walls of her perfectly constructed life began to crumble. "Mrs. Murray, we have found your fingerprints on the murder weapon," Gerald stated during the formal interrogation, his voice calm, almost sympathetic yet unwavering. Sergeant King sat beside him, her gaze sharp and analytical. Desiree's eyes, though tired, still held a defiant spark. "I told you, Inspector. I may have touched it at some point. It was in the study. I occasionally opened mail. That doesn't mean I killed my husband." "Yet, Mr. Murray's prints are not on the weapon," King interjected, her tone clipped. "And it was found under the bed, not on his desk." "I have no explanation for that," Desiree responded, her voice tight. "Perhaps the killer wiped his prints. Perhaps they planted it. Planted it and conveniently left only yours." Gerald leaned forward slightly. "Mrs. Murray, there was no forced entry. The security system was armed. Who else could have been in that room?" Desiree remained silent, her jaw tight. She requested her lawyer, the formidable Horace the Hammer Sterling, a man as renowned for his sharp legal mind as for his extravagant suits. The preliminary court hearing was a circus. The prosecution painted a compelling picture, a wife with means, motive, and opportunity. While no concrete financial motive had yet been identified beyond her significant stake in Murray Investments, the narrative suggested a marriage under strain, culminating in a violent act. The defense, led by Sterling, argued a lack of direct evidence. No witnesses. Circumstantial evidence, he thundered, was not enough to convict his client of murder. The fingerprint, he claimed, could easily be explained by incidental contact. Outside the courtroom, reporters swarmed. "Miss Murray, did you kill your husband?" one shouted. Desiree, flanked by Sterling, simply stared straight ahead, a mask of cold indignation firmly in place. Back at the Psi-D office, Gerald and King were dissecting Paul Murray's life, searching for the missing puzzle pieces. Paul Murray, on the surface, had been a successful, if somewhat austere, businessman. He managed his late father's substantial real estate holdings and served as a non-executive director on several boards. His wealth was inherited, unlike Desiree's, which she had meticulously built herself. He had a reputation for being difficult, King observed, reviewing notes from interviews with Paul's colleagues and acquaintances. "Dem say him, a hard man fee wook wid, always critical, always demanding." Gerald nodded. "And his marriage to Desiree? From the outside, it looked like a power couple. Wealth, influence, impeccable image." "Image can be deceiving, Inspector," King said wryly. "We've spoken to some close associates. Dem say Paul was always resentful of Desiree's success. Him feel she overshadow him. Him always a try control her." This was an intriguing detail. Paul Murray, the scion of old money, might have felt emasculated by his wife's dynamic ascent in the financial world. Could this resentment have festered into a deeper conflict, one that exploded into violence? They delved into the Murray's finances. While Desiree controlled Murray Investments, Paul had significant personal assets. Their wills were straightforward. Each was the primary beneficiary of the other. If Desiree killed Paul, she stood to inherit a considerable fortune, consolidating her financial power. The motive, if not solely financial, certainly had financial implications. What about Paul's personal life? Gerald pressed. Any mistresses, secret debts, anything that could point to an outside killer? King shook her head. So far, nothing. Him was a creature of habit. Home, work, the occasional golf game at the club. No secret families, no gambling debts that we can trace. Seems like a closed book, that one. Then came a new lead, a small crack in the seemingly impenetrable facade. They interviewed Kenny Brown, the Murrays' longtime gardener. Kenny was a quiet man, deeply loyal to the family, especially to Mrs. Murray, who he said always treated him with respect. Kenny, did you notice anything unusual in the days leading up to Mr. Murray's death? Gerald asked. Kenny shifted uncomfortably, twisting the brim of his worn cap. Well, not really. Everything was normal, you know. But Mr. Paul did have a bad temper, especially when him drink. Did he drink often? More than usual lately, Him was vexed, always shouting. Kenny hesitated, then lowered his voice. Me heard him arguing sometimes, loud shouting, from the study. What were they arguing about? Money, Always money. And him always a tell her for stay in her place, you know? Like she was just a pretty face for him. Kenny shook his head. But Miss Desiree, she's strong, She don't take foolishness. This added a new layer to the narrative. The image of the perfect power couple was now further tarnished by the revelation of bitter arguments, fueled by alcohol and resentment. It suggested a volatile environment within the very walls that had once seemed so tranquil. Sergeant King then interviewed Winnie again, the housekeeper. Winnie, initially hesitant, opened up more, emboldened by Kenny's testimony and the unfolding investigation. Winnie, you mentioned Mrs. Murray went for a swim every morning, King began. Did she ever skip a morning? Winnie thought for a moment. Yes, sometimes, if she had an early flight or feeling a bit ill, but not often. And on the morning of Mr. Murray's death, she followed her usual routine? Winnie nodded. Yes, ma'am. Me hear her go downstairs. Me hear her come back up. You heard her come back up, Winnie? Yes, ma'am. From me kitchen, me can always hear the footstep dim on the stairs. She always wear her slippers. King scribbled in her notebook. Did you hear anything else unusual that morning? Any sounds from the master bedroom before Mrs. Murray screamed? Winnie wrung her hands. No, ma'am, nothing. Just the usual quiet. Me, prepare the coffee. Then, the scream. It was loud, ma'am. Terrifying. The lack of any other sounds was puzzling. If there had been a struggle, wouldn't Winnie have heard something, even faint, from her quarters? Gerald and King returned to the crime scene, re-examining the bedroom with fresh eyes. The blood spatter analysis indicated the victim was likely still in bed when he was stabbed. The lack of defensive wounds on Paul suggested he was either asleep, unconscious, or completely surprised. If she stabbed him while he was asleep, King hypothesized, that explains the lack of struggle. But how does she explain the time gap and the swim? Gerald paced the room, his gaze moving from the elegant furnishings to the position where Paul's body had been found. What if the swim wasn't exactly as she described it? They reviewed the security footage from the gate cameras. The cameras recorded anyone entering or exiting the property and the timestamps. Here we go, King said, pointing to the screen. Desiree Murray leaving for her swim at 5:40 a.m. And here she is, returning at 6:40 a.m. 1 hour. Just as she said. Gerald frowned. But this only shows her at the gate. It doesn't confirm she was actually swimming the entire time. A new twist emerged from the ongoing forensic analysis. The medical examiner's report confirmed the cause of death as a single stab wound to the heart. However, it also revealed a detail that had been overlooked in the initial chaos. Paul Murray had a trace of a powerful sedative in his system, enough to induce deep sleep or unconsciousness, but not a fatal dose. Gerald slammed his hand on the desk. A sedative! That explains the lack of struggle. He was drugged. And who would have access to a sedative like that? King mused. Someone close to him. Someone who could administer it without suspicion. Desiree Murray, a woman of means, certainly had access to prescription medications, and if she administered it, perhaps in his evening drink, it would allow her to carry out the act while he was vulnerable. Armed with this new information, they confronted Desiree again. This time, her composure began to crack under the relentless pressure. "Mrs. Murray, we have found a sedative in your husband's system," Gerald stated, his voice devoid of any pretense of sympathy. "Did you administer it to him?" Desiree's face paled further. Her eyes darted nervously, her hands clenching into tight fists. I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't you, Mrs. Murray?" King challenged. This sedative would have rendered him unconscious, making him unable to defend himself. It explains why there was no struggle, why Winnie heard nothing. The weight of the evidence, circumstantial yet damning, was pressing in. The fingerprints, the motive of resentment and potential financial gain, the hidden arguments, the sedative. The unraveling thread of truth was tightening around Desiree Murray. The affluent lifestyle, once a source of admiration, was now tainted by suspicion, revealing the hidden depths of a marriage gone tragically wrong. "We have enough, Mrs. Murray," Gerald concluded, his voice firm. "You're being formally charged with the murder of Paul Murray." Desiree Murray, the formidable CEO, finally broke. A single tear tracked a path down her cheek. But even in her defeat, there was a flicker of something defiant, something unyielding. The silence that followed was heavy with the knowledge of a secret, finally brought into the harsh light. The threads of the Murray's perfect life had unraveled completely, leaving behind a messy knot of betrayal and tragedy.